So this is what we're going to be talking about today. Do a quick overview and talk about how the government buys stuff. Some of the numbers and databases that the government uses that you might not know is out there as far as government spending. We're talking about sam.gov, do a tutorial, and then part of SAM that a lot of people don't know about is the Dynamic Small Business Search, or DSBS. Talk about multiple award schedules, Oregon buys if you're not aware of it, and then full-blown Q&A. But like Rhonda said, if you have any questions during any part of this, just shoot your hand up. It's a pretty small group. I think we can get through it. Slides are going out. This is going up on YouTube. Remain muted unless you have a question, raise your hand. And again, the slides will be going out. So about me, I was born in Oregon in '68. I lived here till I was 18. I ran off and joined the infantry for the U.S. Army in 1986, and I stayed there for 25 years. As soon as I retired, I went to work for a defense company in South Carolina, and I managed their GSA program. The guy I worked for was a buddy of mine, and when he hired me, I couldn't spell GSA, but that's what he hired me to do. So I just kind of figured it out for 5 years. And then I wanted to change of pace. So I went to work for one of those companies that you'd pay to do your government registrations for you when you don't want to do it yourself. And so I worked for them for about 3 years. It was actually the company we hired to get on GSA. And I'll explain GSA in a minute. And then when we moved to Oregon in 2019, this opportunity came up for me to run this GSA contract for Lionheart Alliance. They're a defense contractor in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I've been doing that ever since. So you want to be a government contractor. All of this stuff comes off of the local federal government contracting introduction webpage, and that's at the bottom of the page. So being a government contractor is a really unique experience. You got large defense guys, the big, Raytheon, Lockheed, L3, all the way down to the winery I met at the chamber last year, who was contracted to supply wine to the White House for some type of event. And that was in McMinnville, or right outside of McMinnville in Yamhill County. So you can think of government contracting as we're building aircraft carriers, or it can be something as small as we're providing home health care, we're providing ice cream, we're doing landscaping in a federal cemetery. All those type of things fall into the realm of government contracting. So if you want to sell to the government, you have to do the research. You got to know, what you're selling, and if the government's buying what you're selling. If yes, then how much? Is it, once every 10 years? Is it once every year? Are they doing it every month? Is this a weekly thing? You're kind of doing that thing you do in finance where you're looking for a return on investment, because this is a significant investment of nothing but time. You can do money if you want to, but it is significant in time. The Apex accelerators, those used to be the PTACs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. There's an Apex accelerator, I believe, in Salem and one in Wilsonville. The Small Business Administration offices, the websites, we're going to deep dive into these: usaspending.gov, Federal Procurement Data System, DLA DIBS, which is the defense. It's the Defense Logistics Agency Defense Internet Board Bid System. It's an auction for selling stuff to the government. And sam.gov. And if you think about it like this, the United States government does not produce anything per se. They acquire everything they consume through businesses, small and large, universities, and foreign sources. All right. This is the hard thing about contracting with the government. It is an alphabet soup of acronyms, abbreviations, and Fed speak. Right? This is stuff only that the government speaks. And you have to learn the languages. You have to learn the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, if you're doing anything defense related. You see it on the news all the time. So-and-so is going to jail for violating the defense contracting regulations. This is what they're talking about. And it is I'll do a quick tutorial of it, but you literally could not learn the FAR in a lifetime. You need to know what COTS are, commercial off the shelf. IDIQs, indefinite deliver and indefinite quantity, multiple award schedules program, vendor support business center, the Federal Acquisition Support Center Administration. I mean, it is really complicated to learn all this stuff. I've been doing it for, I don't know, 35 years. 35 years if you count the time I was in the military as a consumer, and I'm still learning on a daily basis because they change it around. All right, so unlike the commercial space, the government operates under commodity codes. Commodity code is nothing more than a numeric or an alphanumeric combination of letters and numbers of how they buy stuff. And there's a bunch of them. So the federal contracting realm in North America uses NAICS, North American Industry Classification System codes. They're maintained by the U.S. Census Bureau. They change every 5 years. We're going to look at some of those in a little bit. The state of Oregon uses the NIGP codes, the National Institute of Government Procurement. Many states use NIGP. However, some use all 5 together. Some of them use 3 and a dash and a 2. Some of them came up with a 9-digit code. So even going to NIGP or paying for a subscription to NIGP doesn't necessarily mean you're going to understand the codes. You have to learn the codes of the states and the entities or the agencies you want to do business with. The UNSPSCs are United Nations Standard Product and Service Codes. Those are 9-digit numeric code that, as it starts out, it's very big, 01 agriculture, and it goes all the way down to a brown soybean when you get down to the last character of the 9. So again, depending on what you're providing, you need to be very specific, because if you just use code 00001, you're telling them you provide every single agricultural product under the sun, and you might just be a winery. Got to know the codes. National stock numbers, those are used by the Department of Defense and Defense Logistics Agency. It's a 13-digit code that's broke up with a 4-digit product and service code, and then another 2 digits, and then another 3 digits, and then another 4 digits, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the scary thing about these is states can make up their own codes. So if you wanted to do business with Montana and you have your registration sheet laid out, for instance, or Maryland, and you go to log on to that state and they use a totally different code system, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what to sell to them. So go to the state, and we'll talk about NASPO in a second. You go to the state you want to register, you find out their code, you have those written down. So when you register for that e-procurement portal, you know what you're selling. Okay. You can't use traditional marketing. The government dudes are not hanging out on your Facebook, your Instagram, your X page, or if you're still using MySpace, because believe it or not, about 600 million or 600,000 people are still using MySpace. You're just not going to find them. So you're going to do a whole bunch of stuff. You're going to put it out there and nobody's going to buy your stuff. So you have to figure out where the buyers are at, and then get after those buyers in the government websites. Now, you can buy lists, and as you start registering for government contracting, these people are going to come out of the weeds coming after you. You can buy lists for contracting officers. However, you're just going to be an annoyance to them. Nobody is going to get an email that you solicit to them or you send to them unsolicited and turn around and buy your stuff. That's not how the procurement works. All right, get registered. This is the only way to do government contracting. SAM.gov. Gather your information. Start with SAM.gov. It can take weeks or months, depending on how backlogged they are, the time of the season, how many other people are applying, and how much information you have that needs to be changed. If you do not have a tax ID number, get a tax ID number. I know a lot of companies operate as a sole source proprietor and they use their national or their social security number. Yeah, you can do that, but I would highly recommend to keep your NSN out of the realm of government contracting, to use your tax ID number. Go make up an LLC and get a tax ID number, but that's more of a lawyery thing. That's just my opinion. All right, this is NASPO, National Association of State Procurement Officials. This is this really cool database that has a link to every single state registration in the union. So While you're waiting on your sam.gov to get approved, you can go to NASPO and you can register in a handful of states. And when I say region, the GSA, the General Services Administration, has divided the country, or actually the world, up into 11 regions. We're in the Pacific Northwest region, which consists of Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii. All right, don't pay, right? Again, you are going to get pursued by all these companies like the one I worked for 3 years. They spend thousands of dollars harvesting data out of these CRMs. So once you register in sam.gov, you pop up on a list. Once you apply for a TIN, you pop up on a list. When you have a UEI or a cage code, you pop up on these lists. Companies like the one I used to work for pay lots of money. They get these big lists, and then they have a bank of people calling you saying, hey, I'm blah, blah, blah. You want to do government contracting. They spent $15 gazillion on ice cream or home health care or whatever you're doing. You need to get into it. Pay me 10 grand and we'll get you rich. It can be true, but they're not doing anything you can't do yourself if you commit a little bit of time and a little bit of resources to doing it. So if you have the money and you can write it off as a marketing expense to the government, go ahead and do it. Again, a lawyer question, not a Crosley question. Yeah, go ahead and do it if you can afford it. But you do not have to pay to register for anything I'm talking about today. All right, this is how we buy stuff. The government's got this Bible called the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And again, it's ginormous and it changes all the time. Anything the government's buying, from paper clips to fighter jets, they have to follow the FAR. The only part of the FAR you have to know is the part that pertains to you. So, and I'll just keep it really simple. If you're providing a service, then you don't have to worry about FAR Part 889 that says you can't sell electronic equipment made in China to the government. You're selling a service. Consequently, if you're selling a product, you don't have to worry about child labor laws and following per diem rates and holiday hours. So don't get bogged down in the enormity of the FAR. Concentrate only on the parts that pertain to you and be compliant with those. That's how the government's going to buy your stuff. All right, the government uses these widgets, right? Contracts, contract vehicles, commercial platforms, and small businesses as sources of products and services. Yes, the government buys off of Amazon. They buy off of Amazon all the time. They buy off of, there's actually an Amazon for the government, which is a little more restrictive than commercial platforms, but there are agencies buying stuff off of Amazon thousands of times a day across the government. They use a P card, government purchase card. Small businesses, we're going to talk about why the government likes to use small businesses and how they protect them from contracting. Basically, there's two ways the government buys stuff. There's a small business set aside, and those are under $150,000, 100% set aside for small business, no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And then the levels of government contracting field for the small business office, they break it down to the competitive and sole source. Competitive, 2 or more people can provide this widget or service. It's going to go out as a competitive bid. If you are the unique owner of this widget, be it a product or service, the government can write a sole source contract for you and nobody else can touch it. Set-asides. You hear a lot about this in government contract. You've got your 8As, you got your hub zone, which is a historically underutilized business zone, women-owned small business, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, and joint ventures. These are the ones that the Small Business Administration acknowledges as set-asides. Different states use different ones. There's set-asides for different religious, there's LGBTQ set-asides, there's different ones, but the SBA, these are the ones that the SBA recognizes. 8A is really cool if you qualify. It's a 9-year program. You can get unchallenged awards being an 8A contractor. And the way it's designed is as you progress through the 9 years of the program, you're less and less reliant by increments of percentages on 8A business. I would go to the SBA website if you want to look into this. Hub Zone is based on zip codes, and they change, which can be scary if you're getting a lot of hub zone contracts and you have long-term contracts. If your hub zone changes, you could lose that contract through no fault of your own. Women-owned small business, pretty self-explanatory. Veteran-owned small business, also self-explanatory. Go to the SBA and check on set-asides to find out if you qualify for these. Now, there's good and bad and ugly of doing these types of things, set-asides. One, if that's the only type of business you want to go after, there might not be enough to go around. Two, you might not be selling something government wants. So you think, okay, I will go after being a woman-owned small business, and then come to find out, because this is a federal contracting set aside, you don't provide the product or service that the government allows under that commodity codes for what you sell. Same thing with veteran-owned business. Being a veteran-owned business really only gives you advantage when you're working with the Veterans Administration. So if you're not doing anything the VA buys or sells, and you go through that and get that set aside, it might not be a value-added proposition. And joint ventures are basically just two or more businesses coming together. Hey, I'm going to provide the service. She's going to provide the product. We're going to do a JV document on this. I'm on the hook for the product. She's on the hook for the service. And we present that as a JV to the government. All right. So this doesn't really happen commercially, right? Nobody does free solicitations in Walmart, or nobody does requests for information at Buy More. But the government puts these solicitations out, these notices of procurement out industry in the forms of pre-solicitations. Hey, we think we're going to buy something in the future. We want industry to see it. We want industry to be prepared for it. So when we do release this, industry is not taken by surprise, and they can prepare an offer in a timely manner. Sources sought. Hey, we need some widgets. We need to find out how many people out there provide these widgets. So we're seeking sources of input so that when we put this out to a competitive bid, we know how many people can provide these widgets. Request for information. Hey, I'm a contracting officer and I have a problem. It could be a material solution, it could be a service solution, or it could be a total solution, which is a combination of the two. So I'm going to put this out to industry. Hey, I got a problem. I need some information on how to solve it. And so you provide feedback. Hey, this is how I would do it. This is how I would do it. They take all those things, they put them together. They look at an equitable solution, and then that in turn could come in turn to be a request for quote. A request for quote is an actual solicitation for a solution, whether it is a product or service, that you are going to quote the government on your total cost to provide a solution to their question. Market research is sort of like a request for information. Hey, we need body armor for all the cops in the state police force for the state of Oregon. They need to have this level, they need to have this stitch count, they need to have this, they need to have that. We're trying to find out if there's anybody in the state of Oregon that can provide this solution. And if not, then they're going to have to take it out of state, out of region, maybe, out of the country, whatever. So that's called MRAS, market research as a service. A sole source. Hey, I'm just going to pick on Becky. Hey, Becky, you've got the only widget that the government can use. We're going right to Becky, right? And we're gonna sole source it, and it's not open to scrutiny because contracting goes through 3 levels of legality: the pre-solicitation, the during, and the post-solicitation. So we're just going to go to you because you provided the solution, or you provided the solution in the past. So we're going to go to you again and not put it out to a competitive bid. And then a justification and approval, sort of like a sole source. Hey, we went to Becky before. Becky provided the solution she said, and the cost she said, and the time she said. So we're just going to write a J&A statement, and we're going to go back to Becky again. People can still bid on it, but she's most likely the incumbent. She's most likely the source we're going to approve. And if they do, then it gets past those protest hurdles because the J&A was approved at the contracting level. types, right? You got planned. Hey, we know that we have 2,000 vehicles in the fleet of Oregon vehicles, and we need gas and electricity for those vehicles. This is what we used last year. This is what we're planning for this year. We need to go buy gas. Opportunity. Hey, Measure 110 provided $100 million of surplus money, and we need to buy stuff for it. We need beds, blankets, we need massage therapy, we need food, we need whatever. So we've got an opportunity to do some unforecasted procurement, and that's what we're going to do. Emergency. Hey, we had some bad wildfires a couple years ago. Wasn't planned, it was an opportunity, but we need solutions to fix these wildfires. Same thing. We need blankets, we need food, we need water, things like that. Some are unfunded. Hey, it would be a good idea if we could buy these. So let's send out a solicitation, and then we'll put an addendum on it that this is an unfunded solicitation. If funds are available, then it will turn into a full and open request for quote. Fully funded. Hey, this is a small business set aside for a woman-owned small business that is a request for quote, and it is fully funded. So when the offers are received and evaluated, they will be awarded under the following criteria. Those are the best ones you want to go after, because you know 90% of the time-ish, somebody's going to get selected to win that. And then there's other, I'm not going to go over all 14 types or 15, depending on how you slice it. But there are a lot of different procurement avenues out there. And you know, some of them are, hey, I've got a government credit card, I've got some money to spend, they want this, I'm just going to do a quick Google search of vendors that have it, and I'm going to buy it, right? That's not solicited, it's not open, it's just under the purchase micro purchase threshold, and they can do it without any or very little oversight. Small Business Administration. This is a really, really good website to go to if you own a small business. So the federal goal is 23% of all government business, federal government business as a prime goes to small businesses. You can see at the bottom of the slide, I rounded it up. $6.13 trillion in FY 2023 is what the government spent. That's everything across the board. 23% of that is 1.4 trillion-ish. So if you own a small business and you didn't get any of that money, that's kind of what's on the table in broad terms of what you could have potentially missed out on as a government contractor. And then the way they assess how these awarded is contract value on the left, small business set aside requirement on the right. Under 10 grand, P card, hey, we go to your website, we call you on the phone, it's ours, we want it. 10 grand all in to include shipping and any incidentals, because if you run taxes or whatever, it goes over 10 grand, that crashes. But 10 grand or under all in, bam, it's done on a P card. 10 to 250, 100% set aside for small business. Not negotiable, do not pass go, do not click 200. It will not go to Lockheed, L3, Raytheon, or any of those guys. 250K or more, that goes into that competitive set aside. Hey, Becky can do it, Dean can do it. It's between 250 and 500K. This is going to go open market. We're going to let them send a proposal. We're going to evaluate the best proposal. Best proposal, we award it to them. They must first consider those set asides. Hub 8A, service disabled veteran owned or woman owned set aside. This is where it starts getting a little gray. So same thing. If it goes to Dean, it goes to Becky. Dean has no set aside. Becky's a woman-owned small business. Who's the award going to go to? Raise your hand if you think it's Becky, because it's probably going to go to Becky. If her pricing's good, if her technical proposal, they call it LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable. If her proposal is LPTA, all things being considered, Dean's is here, Becky's is here, but she's a woman-owned, she's going to get that contract. 750K or more non-construction. If it's not a small business set aside and it goes full and open to all the big boys, if it's over 650K, the big boys must have a subcontracting plan. Remind me when I talk DSBS, because in the DSBS, all the large prime contractors, the L3 Lockheeds, the Raytheons, they have a small business partnership on a website that says, hey, I'm Lockheed Martin. I'm looking for small businesses that can partner with me in these areas. And if you are in one of those areas, you contact that small business liaison and say, hey, I was on the DSBS subcontracting page and I saw you're looking for XYZ. I'm it. Let me send you a capability statement. Let me set up a meeting with your small business director to see how we can help each other out. Oversimplified, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts how it works. And then 1.5 million or more for construction contracts. Same thing. If not a small business set aside, must have a subcontracting plan. DSBS is the way. All right. Let's get into some numbers. So the U.S. Census Bureau maintains what are called the NAICS codes, North American Industry Classification and System codes. And did that pop up? Thumb if you can see the North American Industry Class. Okay, so if you look on the left-hand side where it says NAICS search, 22, 2017, 2012, they're updated every 5 years. So by the system going in here and you do, so I just typed in lumber, and these are the different commodity codes that the government buys lumber under. And as you can see, there's a bunch of different codes. So this goes back to what I was saying with the agriculture. If you're just selling grapes, you don't want to go in and say, I've got a total farming solution where I can provide a tractor, a silo, and the people to work it. So you would go to this website and you would type in what you do, and then you'd see if the commodity code pops up. When you dive into these codes, it gives you a deep dive of what it encompasses, and don't get wrapped around manufacturing, because in the company that I made up that I'm going to show you guys today, Aero and Tactical and Lionheart Alliance, we don't manufacture anything, right? But we can provide that solution from the manufacturer. So we claim that we are a manufacturer. So the government knows we can provide that solution. So going back to 2012 and just the top one, none of these have changed. Some codes change, some drop off, some consolidate. That's why if you're operating under an older set of codes, you might not see it. You might need to put it in the 2012 or the 2017 queue, find the current code, and then look at it in 2022 frames. So a whole bunch of different codes for lumber, right? And not going to go through and play with a ton of these. Just know they're out there. And they're maintained by the U.S. Census Bureau. They're updated 5 years, and check for obsolete codes. All right, SAM.gov, I'm going to do a deep dive on this. Just know that it is the foundational registration for doing government contracting. And it looks like this, and this is kind of important. If you go to SAM.gov and that does not pop up, it could be a false page. And when I mean that, this little thing right here, and then look for this official website. And again, these are 100% free. So if you do register in SAM.gov and you get an email from the $5.99 SAM.gov guy, or you get the postcard in the mail from the $5.99 SAM.gov guy, and they say, hey, Dean, your SAM's fixing to expire. You're going to miss out on government contracting opportunities, yada, 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 yada. Pay me $5.99 and I'll do all these amazing things. You're really paying them $600 for 5 minutes of work. Because once you're registered in SAM.gov, you don't need to touch it for 1 calendar year. And what I tell people is the day you register, you put it on your Google Calendar for 9 months out, going for the next 10 years. And every 9 months, you get a pop-up on your calendar. Hey, your SAM's going to expire 90 days. You can spend 30 minutes in the next 90 days to log in.gov on your own and update your own SAM registration. It's pretty simple. Oops. All right, this is one of my favorite websites in the whole world. This is the Federal Procurement Data System. And this guy right here gives you the who, what, when, where, and why for government contracting. So you can spend hours and hours and hours on fpds.gov on the easy search. Now, you do not have to log in. This is 100% open source. If you do create a login account, which I have, I've seen no other benefit from it because all the reports that you can generate on the back end go through sam.gov. On the right-hand side, you see where it says latest news, and it's got the NAI codes. Those are codes that are created for unique situations. So you look down and you see Ukraine mission, UNAI expansion for COVID-19, which is Papa 20 Charlie, which I've used 1,000 times. There's codes for what's going on in the Ukraine. Every time there's a hurricane on the East Coast, there's a commodity code for it. And so if you put in Papa 20 Charlie, what it's going to show you is since COVID was created, there's been over 161,000 contracts that have been let by the government just dealing with COVID-19. And the 161,000 is at the top of this page right here. If I can get my mouse over there, where my mouse is at right there. It shows you 30 per screen. You can filter by the obligation amount, which is the dollar amount of the contract. And so the Department of the Army let one out to this company for $5,295,000,000 in 2021. Big contracts. If you want to look at the date signed, which is top to bottom, the last contract was September 30th of 2022. And even though this was an $11 million contract, they took back $1 million and some change, or $43 million contract. They took back $1 million and change. When basically the at-home testing ended and the government started recharging for the government started charging for the kits. There we go. Now, if you put in things like Oregon, $1 million in some contracts awarded that either had the state of Oregon in it, Oregon was a place of performance, the company was for Oregon, Oregon was in the web, whatever. If you go by the date signed, there was a contract yesterday for the University of Oregon for $105,000 from NASA. And that's right there. There was a contract for $61,000 to the Social Security Administration, to the Oregon Health Authority, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you get good with this website, you can go to the advanced search and you can start adding things like, when are the contracts going to expire? What was the zip code the contracts were in? What NAICS codes were these contracts in? And so you can start to build some competitive intelligence of, hey, Bob's company got awarded this contract in December. It's going to expire in May. I'm going to look at this contract coming out again in May or June, and I'm going to set up a search in sam.gov, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So when this contract comes out, I'm prepared for it. I already know the dollar amount. I know how long Bob took to do the contract. So I've got some really good competitive intelligence for when this next contract comes out for me to get in front of it and at least be part of the conversation. Again, I use FPDS through Lionheart on a daily basis. You can also do competitive research So this is actually my company, but let's say this was a different company and I wanted to see their contract performance. I could look at all of the contracts that this company had going back to the beginning of when the company was founded or by date. And then if I wanted to go in and look at this, here's one for the U.S. Marshals. If I wanted to go in and look at this office, I can set up searches for that office in sam.gov. So anytime that office put another solicitation out, it would automatically send me an email and I would be able to get in front of that solicitation instead of seeing afterwards. I could also find out if this solicitation had an expiration date, or if it was just a one-off. So that's FPDS. Friggin' love that site. I'm on it every day. USAspending.gov. This is another little gem. This website is also, this is an official government website. Here you know how. This is another one of those really good competitive or research sites that takes a little bit of time to learn. It's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a curve, but you start off up here with a keyword, and let's just do keyword Oregon. Get the magnifying glass. When it turns green, your filter's good to go. So let's look at FY24 and FY23. So government procurement doesn't use calendar years. They use fiscal years. Fiscal year for the government ends on September 30th, starts on October 1st. It's broken up into 3 quarters, January, March, or January to April to July, and then to September, something like that. You can use all sorts of these cool filters: agency, award amounts, recipient types, NAICS code, blah, 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 blah. I'm just putting in Oregon and the last 2 fiscal years. And this is what pops up. So we have over 14,000 or 1,400 contracts. Those are prime contracts, grants, direct payments, loans, what have you. Over the period of time, in 2023, there was some $20 billion. And in 2024, now keep in mind, this is October 1st through today, there's about $4.7 billion. You can break this down into quarters, and you should always see a spending spike in 4th quarter, because that's Q4. That's when the government dumps all their money. So Becky's a government agent. I'll just keep picking on Becky. She works for a government agency. She's got a budget of $10 million. So simple math says, okay, I can spend $2.5 million a quarter. So she spends $2 million in January. Depending on the agency, that $500,000 rolls over into quarter 2. So now she's got $3 million to play with. Well, something happens. She spends 3.5. So then she loses 2 off the next quarter. So then she's being a little careful. She only spends $500,000. When Q4 rolls around, she's got almost half of her budget because she's been hanging on to that. And she's like, well, the government kind of plays by these strange rules. If I give Becky $10 million budget, and at the end of the year, she comes back and gives me $2.5 million back, then in my mind, I over budgeted her. Next year, I'm only going to give her $7.5 million. Becky doesn't want to have her budget cut by 25%. So she's going to do everything she can to spend most of that budget. So at the beginning of Q4, she gets all her department heads together, Dean, Rhonda, Chris, Jeremy, Bob, Cindy, whatever, and says, hey, I need a wish list of stuff you need, want, would like to have. You got a week, come back to me. So we bring back this big list to her. She racks and stacks it. Now, we're not going to all buy, cars, but I'm trying to keep it simple. She racks and stacks it, allocates that against her money, and then dumps all that money in to buy all this stuff. And that's why the 4th quarter always spikes. Now, a lot of government agencies have said, well, that's pretty stupid. Instead of taking that money back, if they don't spend it, we'll hold them to the same budget they had the year previous, and then we'll see what happens. Or we can allocate that excess money to other departments that had a shortage, and we'll still give Becky $10 million at the end of the year. It just depends on the department. It depends on, I'd say the political climate at the time, who does what and how they take it back and how they allocate it, and then under what executive agency it falls under, because they all have different rules and regulations they fall under. And so you can do the same thing by months. And I apologize. I've got 3 screens going here, and my mouse likes to disappear from one to the next. So finding it sometimes is difficult. And then you can see the spike at the end of, when you're looking at the months, every quarter, there's that dip. At the end of the quarter, the spending jumps way up. So that just shows you that trend. The other thing we can do is we can go to a map. So this is a map of the United States. And of course, since Oregon's highlighted, that's where all the money's been spent. And if I zoom in, I can look at county spending. And what do you think the big dark one in the middle is? That's where Salem's at. And I can look at congressional districts. So, and this is important during election times. If you provide some product or service, like you're a printing agency, a marketing agency, an ad agency, you provide food, you provide snacks, knowing which congressional districts spend money when they're having local elections can get you in front of some of these opportunities to provide services for these parties that are buying stuff for the election time. So there's a whole bunch of different stuff you can use this type of intelligence for. Again, it's free, it's open source. I didn't log into anything. I'm just typing stuff into a computer and this is what I'm getting. And then this shows you the location of the recipient. So this is where the contractors were at that won the money. This is important because a lot of this stuff in usaspending.gov, it's either place of performance where the work was done, or it's where the money came from, but might have gone out of state to another vendor. So this could have been, hypothetical Bonneville Dam construction contract for $20 million could have gone to some company in New York. Right? It doesn't really delineate unless you go back out of this and you go back to the table, and then you can look at, here's a $50 million management training contract. If I look at the actual contract number, it's going to tell me who did it, where they were at. Okay, it was Department of Labor. And then this will subdivide everything out, the different quarters. You can dig down into here. You can find out who the money went to, when the money went to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can get sucked into usaspending.gov and like, hey, I'll go in there for a couple of minutes at lunch. And then 2 hours later, you're still looking in here because it's just rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And the same contracts that you find in FPDS, you can take those contract numbers, drop them into USA Spending, and do a deep, deep dive, sometimes down to the actual widget that they sold. These are a lot of fun, and you can spend a lot of time in them. Come on. Come on. There we go. Okay, Library of Congress. This is a fun site. Not going to spend a whole lot of time for it. This is your congressional library. Official stuff, different acquisition.gov, GSA schedules. Everything you want to know about government contracting is right here on this website. And I'm just going to go into this because it's easier than the next slide. But this really is kicking my tail here. Federal acquisition regulations. So this is the FAR. This is the Bible for contracting. On the left-hand side are basically your chapters, 1 through 53-ish. FAR Part 52 is, by the most part, the part that I have to abide by. And then if you just look at FAR Part 1, when you open it up, it's nothing more than a bunch of more hyperlinks, hundreds of them. And so you're reading through this thing, and then it'll say, hey, see FAR Part 1.72 through 2.95. So you can't get an answer by going to the FAR part you want to go to. You got to go to the FAR part, and then you got to go to all the sub-FAR parts that support it. It is mind-numbingly difficult. And a lot of the contracts that you respond to are going to say, proposal in accordance with FAR Part 52.22 dot blah, 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 blah. And you're just like, what in the heck am I even? And so you'll go to it and you'll do the research, and it will have to do with mercury in the RFID tag of the wooden pallet that you're sending on the back of a diesel truck. I'm not doing that. I'm selling lawn care services. So it can really, really get exhausting unless you know the FAR parts that pertain to your business and you have those written down somewhere. Then you can just do a copy paste into the contract. So let's just say I have to worry about FAR Part 52, and I only have to worry about 52.105. So if that contract, if I'm 52.105 and there's 50 FAR parts in the contract, I can control paste or control C FAR Part 52.105, put it into the contract document, and if it doesn't pop up, I really don't have to worry about it in general terms. So again, that's just a quick way, because you're not going to learn all these stupid FAR clauses. I've been, again, 11 years. I don't. I've learned the ones that are particular for me, and typically is FAR Part 52 because that's product based. But you just have to get familiar with the ones that pertain to you and worry about those. Okay, come on, mouse, where you at? There we are, up, 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 and done. All right, and again, it's a Bible. And I showed you FAR Part 1. Even FAR Part 1 is confusing. So learn the ones that pertain to you. Write those down somewhere. Have them on a Word document. So when you're looking at contracts, you can copy and paste your particular FAR parts into the contract, see if it pertains to you. All right. SAM.gov. And again, it's foundational contract for all federal acquisitions. Yes, can they call you up with a credit card and buy your stuff? Absolutely. Does that make you a government contractor? Yes and no. Because the rules, the FAR rules for micro purchase threshold are completely different. If you want to do anything that's contract based, you have to register in SAM.gov. SAM.gov's got a complicated history. It started out as a CCR, the Central Contractor Registry, back in, I don't know, 2008, 2007. It had a whole bunch of different websites tied to it. And then the government migrated CCR into SAM.gov somewhere around 2011 when I got into contracting. And it was SAM.gov and FBO, Federal Business Opportunities. They worked really good together. There's a movie with, I can't remember, I should have remembered it, but there's a movie about it. And at the end of the day, if I can remember it, I'll point it out. But it basically encapsulates the history of SAM.gov, and it got really huge during the war. So what it does is today it vets your company to make sure you are qualified to receive federal dollars. And it starts doing that by what's called the IRS TIN match. So you put your tax ID number into the database, and it goes up to the IRS, and the IRS says, hey, Chris Crossley, you owe a bunch of tax money. You owe a bunch of dollars in back taxes. We'll let you do government contracting, but not with a credit card. It's going to go through wide area workflow or an electronic funds transfer. So as you win these contracts, the government can skim your owed taxes off the top. And if there's any money left, then they'll put it in your account. Again, that's oversimplified, but that's kind of how it works. So once you do your IRS TIN match and your verification, they assign you a unique entity identifier. Now, if you've ever heard of the DUNS number, the Duns and Bradstreet number, that was a contract that was given to a third-party entity by the United States government that expired in 2018 that made them the third-party vetting agency for anybody that wanted to do government contracting. So Crisco, that's my made-up company, says, I want to be a government contractor. I go into Duns and Bradstreet, I register, I get a DUNS number. I then take that DUNS number, I put it into SAM.gov with my tax ID number. It registers me in SAM. It also goes to the Defense Logistics Agency, and they see, do I have any open contracts or any clauses in federal contracting that would bar me to getting awarded a contract? If no, then I get issued my 5-digit commercial and government entity code. It's called a CAGE code. It's an alphanumeric code. It's assigned by the DLA. It's unique to any agency you have. So when you're in SAM.gov, you get your UEI, and subsequently you'll get your CAGE code assigned. The government has gotten very, very restrictive in awarding CAGE codes. Virtual offices, no go. Shared offices, no go. They are going to physically send you, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. If they send you a questionnaire, an email, hey, you need to answer these questions, it's very specific. Please reply to all and answer these questions. A lot of people will take the email, put it into a Word document and send it back, and it will get rejected. And they'll go over that over and over and over again. That's why I say it can take months for this registration to get approved. Now, if you've been in the state of Oregon all your life, you've owned your own business, you've been in the same place under the same tax ID number, you don't owe any back taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you can get approved in SAM.gov and get your CAGE assigned in a couple of weeks. That all depends on the backlog of the government agencies that are filling out your application or completing your application and the time of the year it is. I would caution on doing it like right when we get done with this webinar, because it's a holiday season. They're all taking half days. They're all taking vacations. They're still getting caught up for end of year spending. It's a crazy time. Gather your information, and somewhere around the 1st to middle of January, start doing the SAM process. It forces transparencies in small businesses that want to collect federal money. Why do I mean that? The SAM.gov registration is about 26 pages long. They ask lots of invasive questions. And depending on how you answer those questions, depends on how quickly you get approved, because that depends on how much research they do. If you say you're owned by a company in Somalia as a parent company, yeah, they're going to ask a lot more questions. But if you're, if you're cut and dry, I'm in Oregon, nobody owns me, I don't have any distributors, I don't have any affiliates, there's no foreign owned, I don't want to work overseas, I don't want to send my stuff on international barges, it can go really quick. If you lie on any of these and it's discovered that you did lie through whatever, they can disbar you from contracting, they can suspend you, they can take award money back with accrued interest. People have even gone to prison for contracts. I was talking to a lady who's one of the inspector generals for the GSA, because I report guys that are using GSA Advantage wrong, like selling guns. And she told me about a guy that just went to prison and had to forfeit $6 million because he was sending Chinese knockoff boots to the US government saying they were made in America. So yeah, big penalties if you lie on this stuff. SAM is a pain in the neck times 10. It used to be sort of easy. Now it's become very difficult because they've merged it into multiple databases. It requires a learning curve. Like, I don't use SAM very often. I use it enough to maintain, a dangerous status, but I'll even go in there and I'll be like, why did I click that? And how do I get back? And sometimes it's easier just to log out and log back in, because you get lost and it automatically saves your work. If you don't have a login.gov account, you need to establish a login.gov account before you establish sam.gov. All right, so this is what it looks like when you start. Official government website. Am I getting started? Am I renewing my entity? No matter what you do, you're going to have to, when you try to log in, you accept, and then login.gov pops up. Every time you log into this thing, it's got 10-party authentication. It's a pain in the neck. Every time I log in, they send me a text with a 6-digit code. Now, you can set up numerical keys. You get 16 keys, I think, that expire if you don't use them for a year. Those are a pain in the neck. You can have a digital key, a digital certificate. Just for me, for the frequency that I use this, which is not very, I don't mind getting a text every time I log in here. So you go to sign in, it pops up, they send you a text, it expires in 10 minutes. I'm not showing any secrets here. You pop that in, and bam, it pops up to where your entity's at. So this is like your entity information at the beginning of sam.gov. So about in 2016, I created Aero and Tactical. I named it after my daughter. I know government contracting, I know tactical gear, I know defense contracting. So I figured I would set this up and maintain it as a legacy to my kid if she ever wanted to take it over. So that's why I have an active sam.gov account, because I maintain Aero and Tactical. When you log in, initially, you're going to hit the left-hand side, which is you get started. Once you already have an active entity in here, you're going to renew and update. And if you look on the top left-hand side, it's telling me I don't have to do anything in this database until September 11th of 2024. So I guarantee in about 3 months, I'm going to start getting a bunch of postcards, phone calls, and emails saying, I need to redo my sam.gov. I'm going to miss out contracts, blah, 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 blah. But it tells you right there when you log in when you have to do something. You, if you've never done this before, are going to click on Get Started. And then it's going to pop up. You're about to create a new entity record. All right. So you are no longer a business. You are now an entity. That's how the government refers to you in sam.gov. We'll ask you a few short questions. Yeah. I would highly suggest you download the registration guide when you do this. And if you can afford to print it out, print it out. If not, at least keep it, have a good Adobe program that you can read a PDF and you can make notes in the PDF for your entity, because you're going to get a new UEI, which replaced the DUNS in April of 2022. UEIs, 12 digits alphanumeric, and they're going to ask you to fill out your core data, your points of contact, your assertions, and reps and certs. That looks like this. So on the left-hand side, so I started my business 12/1/2017. I use a fiscal year instead of a calendar year. It ends on 9/30, like I said before. On the left-hand side, that is all the stuff you need to fill out. Now, every single one of those dots is not one question. So the business information, and I just cut it off, it's 4 pages. And then you get to the end, save and submit. There's a review page that pops up so you can look at it as it's going to pop up for your identity. You look through everything, and then you go to IRS. And they're going to ask you for a tax ID number, or you're going to have to put in banking information because they use electronic funds transfer for contracts over a certain threshold or a certain agency. Your details of ownership, those are about 8 pages long. That's where you're foreign owned, local owned, there's franchises, there's, if you're going to ship internationally using a barge, I'm not kidding, that's a question, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to go through reps and certs, your assertions. Assertions are what you sell, right? Those are your NAICS based or your products and service code based. And you're going to get all the way down to it. Oops. And then you're going to go through your small business certification, which is your DSBS, Dynamic Small Business. And then you can submit registration. Sorry. When you submit your registration, it's going to send an email to the email of record. Hey, you submitted your sam.gov. You're probably going to go through your IRS TIN match in 24 to 48 hours. It's going to be quick. Bam. Hey, we validated IRS TIN. Now we're going to go through the rest of the process. And they're either going to send you periodic emails, or you're just going to log in here and you're going to get your status still in process, status whatever. Eventually, you're going to get an email, hey, your sam.gov is active, congratulations, yada, yada, hama, hama. Then you'll have a UEI and you'll have a cage code. At that point, you're ready to start doing government contracting. So you go through all this. Okay, why? Why am I doing this? Well, that's not right. Yeah, that's all buggered up. Okay, so how that happened, but all right, guess what? We're going to do this real time, folks. Give me 1 second. Maybe. And you go through your slides 1,000 times. What are we doing? So and of course, your passwords for this thing have to be uber ridiculous. They have to be 15 characters with a big letter number combination and a whole bunch of numbers. And I hope this works. Of course it didn't. Give me a sec, folks. Okay, we're having some real technical difficulties right now. Well, what I was trying to show in sam.gov, and I actually had my slides up, and I did my, just like this one, I did my one for my searches, and they came up in the right sequence. I think my pictures are bearing. But what you can do, once you register in sam.gov, you can search under commodity codes, keywords, what have you, and you're going to get a whole bunch of different searches that are going to pop up, and you can save those. So in this particular search that I did for Oregon, and I did for taxes, and I did for painting, those are all hyperlinked in. So I can click back in that search. It'll show me all my hits, so I don't have to go back through and search for these keywords all over again. And then I can go into those searches, and where it says notify right here, if I click notify, anytime that search changes, it's going to send me an email. So if there's any added, if there's any deleted, if anybody got awarded, it's going to send me an email for this particular search. So again, I don't have to keep logging in here and doing all these searches. And you can build these searches by the agency you want to work with. So if you just want to work with the Department of Veterans Affairs, you're not going to get searches from these other 212 federal agencies, and there are thousands of sub-agencies. So once you log in, you go over to the search, you start playing with the search. And again, you can't really break anything in here. If you mess something up, you can delete the search. You can download the search onto a big Excel spreadsheet or a PDF. And you just click on go into your saved searches, and it'll take you there. Well, this might actually work. So, no, I guess it won't. And apologize for that. That's some bad slide wizardry on my fault. The other thing you can do at the top of sam.gov, once you're logged in, like I said, in FPDS, if you log in, all your reports come through here. So you go into the data bank and you can run reports. How much money did this agency spend? Where did they spend it? How often did they spend it? what commodity codes that they spend it on. That's SAM, right? And again, the biggest thing is to get registered in there. Once you're registered in, you can play with it. If you need help playing with it, you can get with me offline and we can do a deep dive into your SAM once it's active, and I can show you how to set up some searches. The DSBS, this is maintained by the small business. It's one of the last steps for doing your SAM.gov registration. And what you do is you just click on that and it pops up this page. You go into your open market search, and I just highlighted the state of Oregon. And these are all the businesses that are registered in the state of Oregon that have done the DSBS. And so depending on, actually I use one of the filter, but when you go into here and it tells you as of this date, so this is as of yesterday, and then I clicked on the women-owned businesses, and here's a SEA Reach, here's the name of the person, they're in Sheridan, and this is what they do. So this is how, when you want to do a joint venture and you don't know who to partner with, you go into the DSBS and you're like, hey, I want to do home health care and I want to buy some hospital beds. Well, I do home health care, but I don't know anything about buying durable medical equipment. So I'm going to go into this list and I'm going to look for companies that might sell durable medical equipment. And that's how the DSBS works. Once you're registered in SAM.gov and you fill out your DSBS profile, your business will be listed here as well. So, you know, if companies go, hey, Dean, hey, Becky, I found you on the DSBS search, you know exactly what you're talking about. This is how they found you through here. So they're registered as well. And they reached out to you probably to do a JV thing. I know we're killing time here. Multiple award schedules. These are referred to GSA. This is what I call Amazon for the government. So products and services are on a virtual shelf. The government just goes and they can pluck as much of your stuff off the shelf as they want. They don't have to write a contract for it. It doesn't go out to competitive bid. That's why it's called a multiple award schedule. Last year, or in 2020, the government did about $36.6 billion off of the MOS. 37% was small business, so it's way higher than the government's contracting objective. There's about 12,000 businesses, and they do an average of 1.2 million per year. And this isn't a bragging point, but Lionheart did 1.35 million in the last quarter of FY23 alone. So you can really sell a lot of stuff to the government if you put in the time and effort to make your multiple award schedule work. Caveats: got to be in business for 3 years, 200 federal tax ID, got to have $25,000 in sales for stuff you want to sell to the government. It can't be from, it's got to be TA compliant trade agreement acts, nothing from China, Taiwan, China, North Vietnam, Pakistan, North Korea, stuff like that. If you're interested in multiple award schedules, this is what I do every day, all day. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. Who's here to Oregon Buys? Oregon Buys is the place where Oregon procures stuff. This is Arrow and Tactical. If you've never been just registered in Oregon Buys before, you go to the Oregon Buys website, you click on register new entity, you put in your tax ID number, a company name, and an email address, you hit submit. It's going to run your tax ID number through the Oregon Buys website and to the IRS. And if you've never registered in there before, then this pops up. It's going to take you to the company information page. You're going to fill out everything with an asterisk. Now, the more you fill out, the better your registration profile is, but you have to fill out everything with an asterisk as a minimum. And you just go across it, you go down to the bottom, you hit submit, it takes you over to administrator, address terms, blah, blah, blah. The COVID is this is the certification of office business for inclusion and diversity for Oregon. This is a separate registration. You cannot self-certify. The only thing you can do is check on, you agree with the terms and conditions here. If you try to click on any of these, a red X pops up because you have to go through and register COVID separately. So even though you are a woman-owned or a service-disabled owned or whatever, if you're not registering COVID, it won't allow you to do this. So I say, click this, click on COVID, leave the web page open, and then continue through your registration in Oregon, because you're not going to get this awarded today. You can register in Oregon in one day. Commodity codes. Oregon uses the NIGP, the National Institute of Government Procurement Codes. So you can put in a keyword here, or you can drop down to the class, and basically that just pops up these. So one administrative, and then agriculture, etc. There breaks out. There's thousands of these codes. So you would put in your derivative keyword. Sometimes you put an asterisk before or after it. It'll pop up all the things associated with it. And then you just click. So whatever keywords you come up with, you click on those keywords, and then those classes are added to your profile. Once you go through, you hit save next. It goes to summary. You hit submit. It's going to give you an Oregon vendor ID right off the top of the bat immediately. You write that down, or you copy paste it into whatever you use, and then you'll get an email eventually, within a day or two. Hey, congratulations, you're now a vendor. You're registered, and then you can see all the contracting opportunities through the Oregon Buys website. This used to be called ORPIN until a couple of years ago. But again, businesses registered here, what the government in Oregon's buying, who they're buying it from, how much they're buying it for, and then you can look at contracting opportunities that are coming up. If they're systemic, if they're doing it over and over and over again, then you can try to, jump into that mix, contact some of the incumbents. Hey, I noticed you're doing food for the schools. I'd like to offer this. Can I jump on as a sub to provide this or this? And that's it. I went a little bit over. What are your questions?
I sent one via the chat. What is their definition of a small business?
So small businesses are determined by your NAICS codes. So the SBA uses products or service codes. Products are usually by your employee standards between 500 and 750, and services are usually based on your income, which is an aggregate of 3 years, and it's generally in the millions. So unless you're employing more than 500 people or making 20 million a year for the last 3 years, you should be in the small business. You can check by actually putting a NAICS code into Google and going, what is the small business size standard for NAICS, blah, 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 and it will pop up. It's also in the DSBS. And there's some caveats, because if you're doing defense related stuff, if you're doing medical related stuff, some construction related stuff, and some research and development stuff, you can bust out of the NAICS code for money because of the nature of the research. But typically it's, in the millions or high hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of employees.
Thank you. That's cool. It's good to know.
Yep. Anybody else? All right, take out a piece of paper, label it 1 to 50. Kidding.
Wow, thank you, Chris. We appreciate your time today. That
Absolutely.
was very informative.
Emails at the bottom. If you have anything, hit me up offline. It's been fun talking to you guys, and good luck and have a happy holiday and a safe new year.
Thank you.